Greetings, beloveds. This is Amy Caryn Johnson, the Earth Channel, and we'll start with another poem today. Water follows the path of least resistance, and yet carves beautiful canyons. You could say they work against each other, or you could say they each define the other. But the stone and water hold these identities within. So today, as promised, I'm going to share with you my philosophy and interpretation of human design through the lens of sidereal astrology and how I came to that interpretation. But to start out, I would like to explain how someone else has made a different interpretation and contrast that with my own. So this past week, a YouTube video came out where an acquaintance of mine, I've never met him in person, but he's been in the human design community as long as I have, longer actually, Jonah Dempsey, I believe is his last name. And he basically discussed taking the 64 hexagrams of the human design, I Ching, the way they're typically laid out on the tropical zodiac, and just rotating them. So, for example, my sun in the tropical zodiac is at the end, towards the end of Virgo, but in the sidereal zodiac is towards the beginning of Virgo. So I'm still a Virgo sun, no matter which one you look at, but the hexagram, the way that he changed it to be, would instead be at the beginning of Virgo. And I can't tell you right offhand which hexagram that would be, but the hexagram would be completely different. And that is how you would look at someone's chart and how it would change even if you're not using human design with all the 64 hexagrams. Like I said, if you look at my Western chart, it's at the end of Virgo, the sun, and sidereal, it's at the beginning. So it's just changing those, rotating them almost a full degree. My interpretation of human design through the lens of sidereal astrology goes back to the story of Ra-Uru-Hu's encounter with the voice, which is basically how human design was brought into this world in this modern age. It may have been in the world previously, but it was lost to us at some point along the way, and it was only brought back into the world through Ra-Uru-Hu's encounter with this voice. And you can find the story on YouTube. If you Google that phrase, you can hear him talk about that encounter. Basically, I believe it was channeled. There was some kind of intelligence, some entity who came to him through this voice, and there was a light involved as well. I believe at another time he talks about it coming from the well in Ibiza where he was, or the earth, or a crystal even, and perhaps that intelligence was stored in that way. I've heard of similar things in other cases, but basically that knowledge came through him, and he recorded it over an 8-day period on January 3rd of 1987. And this goes back to the question of how astrology came into the world in the first place. Do we believe that we just created it? We investigated into different phenomena and decided that this is how things work? Or did we receive this knowledge from somewhere? Was it channeled? I'm of the mind that it was probably received and channeled from some higher beings, divine, even source potentially. And throughout the millennia, it has been used for a long time, maybe longer than we even know. The different types of astrology have obviously diverged: Western versus Vedic, tropical versus sidereal. And it seems to me that, and this was discussed in the video that came out last week as well, but the Western astrologers are sort of sticking with the seasons more so as an expression of the signs, holding to, Aries being when springtime comes. And, there's something to that for sure. They fit because that's traditionally how they've been interpreted. And you can scarcely, if you're in the same communities I am, which you probably are on Facebook, you can scarcely see a post about astrology without it being Western astrology and the tropical zodiac. Some people only know that they are a certain sign, and they don't even realize that that is where their sun was, and that there are all these other placements of other heavenly bodies. So that's why, rather than rotating the 64 hexagrams almost an entire sign, my interpretation takes a snapshot of the stars on January 3rd, 1987, and assumes that that channeled knowledge was correct at that time. And then it only adjusts those signs, those gates, those hexagrams by a little bit to keep up with the times, basically. So I basically took the sidereal zodiac on that date, January 3rd, 1987, and assumed that that's where the hexagrams were supposed to be based on those different planetary placements and so on and so forth. So because the sidereal zodiac only changes about a degree every 70 some years, I don't have the exact number right now, but that's approximately correct. Since 1987, it has not been 70 years yet. My adjustment of that sidereal zodiac and with those 64 hexagrams is not that different. So your human design chart, anyone born within the last 70 years, is pretty similar. The lines may have changed, and I haven't really gotten into the lines on any of my videos, partly for that reason. They're the things that will definitely change. And your rising sign will change too, but human design doesn't really get into rising signs very much. And one other reason related to this interpretation that I have received is that, like I said, Western astrologers keep the signs where they are because of the seasons. They want them to stay the same due to the seasons, and they've been associating those signs with the seasons for so long that they're a little bit entrenched in that philosophy, and that's fine. There's a lot to be gained and definitely some truth there. However, I think there's a reason that they called these different signs the names of star constellations, all the way from, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, all the way around. Those are star constellations. And in Vedic astrology, there are even sub-constellations of the nakshatras, which I mentioned in my last video. There are 27 of those around the entire zodiac, and they relate a little bit more to the moon. Those are also to do with the stars. So I believe that there is something to the stars being with those signs and staying with those signs. So even though now, for example, the full moon, by the time you're seeing this video, it will be yesterday, Saturday. Most people are saying, Western astrologers are saying that it was in Virgo. It was actually in Leo. And if you look at the star apps, you can see that the moon was in Leo. If you look quickly enough, it's about to go into Virgo now, but as of the full moon, it was actually in Leo, and I posted about that in my group and on my page. So I will share screenshots, and probably put them up already by the time I'm saying this in the video, of my interpretation on where those hexagrams lie. It will make more of a difference with the actual signs, like I said, not so much with your human design chart, but it will with the lines if you're into that aspect of it, the lines. There are 6 lines with each hexagram, and they create 6 more divisions within each hexagram, according to the zodiac as well. I'm not sure I'm going to get into those anytime in the near future, but maybe sometime down the road, we'll see. So speaking of channeling, let's meditate together if you'd like to join me and see what Gaia might have to contribute to this conversation that she hasn't already. So a few deep breaths. All right, Gaia is telling me it is time for me to speak about something that I haven't really spoken of before. And that is the fact that we are not alone in this universe. I have certainly spoken of source before. I've spoken of diversity. But the fact is that Earth is one of the most diverse planets, at least at this time, in the universe. Definitely the galaxy, at least. And that is in contrast to other populated planets in the universe and galaxy. There are extraterrestrials, there are other dimensions as well. 12 dimensions. And many of you watching this may already be familiar with those concepts. Some of you may lean more towards the angelic beings of the 12th dimension. And many of you may also be familiar with our vast history on Earth, much of which is not necessarily recorded, at least in conventionally accepted places. But Atlantis, Lemuria, Egypt. And during these times, humans communicated with other realms and other populations from other planets. And this is another reason why the stars are important in astrology. Part of the reason this Earth is so diverse is because we have received contributions from those other populations, from so many other dimensions. And so that has created one of the biggest challenges of any planet in the universe for all of us. It is one of the reasons why it has taken us so long to begin ascending to the next dimension. We've had so much conflict because we each have these different ways of being, these different ways of thinking, different ways of believing, and those are precious to us. And so when we hear of someone else thinking, believing, being different, sometimes we have felt threatened by that, and sometimes we have truly been threatened by that. When anyone believes that there is only one way of being, believing, and thinking, they can try to force others to be, believe, and think that same way. But it is not necessary for everyone to think, believe, and be the same way. In fact, it is best if we are not the same. That diversity is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing, and it is part of our purpose to bring together all those wonderful facets of humanity. And it allows us to expand even farther once we reconcile all those differences, once we embrace them for the glorious reality that they all are. So just take a moment and sit with that truth. Welcome it into your heart. Feel the reality that allows all of those different ways to coexist. And now that you've allowed that into your heart, I invite you to send that love out to all others, that acceptance, that embrace. It's okay to be whoever you want to be, and it's okay to change too. Many of us don't realize how much we change, even from day to day sometimes. We express a different part of ourselves. And when we allow Source to flow through us, that makes us even more varied at times. One last deep breath. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste, beloveds.